going. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go again. This is the third St Mary's Hustings in 6 days. I think there must be a record for this parish. I just remind everybody who isn't from the parish that this is a St Mary's Hustings, so I would ask them to let the St Mary parishioners ask their questions. Just a reminder for health and safety that there are 2 exits to this room. The first is at the back there where the main stairs are where you came in, and the second is through this door to the left. There is an outside staircase. Our 2 candidates have tossed up, and Juliet will speak first for up to 15 minutes. Sue will ring the bell at 14.5 minutes if she's still speaking, and finally again at 15 minutes, and John will speak second. So please, if you're asked to ask a question, stand up, give your name, and speak up, please, so that everybody can hear. At the end, we will have 3 minutes each to sum up, and hopefully we'll be out of here by about 9:30. So, okay, let's get the show underway. And Juliet, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming out tonight to this traditional parish hustings. For anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Juliet Galashaw, and I'm the current Connétable, having previously been your deputy. This is, I think, the 4th time that I've stood before you to be tested in this way, and I hope that this evening we'll have some interesting questions once again that will put the candidates through their paces. Naturally, because I come into constant contact with parishioners on a daily basis through my work, I'm continually asking them for feedback. And like the other Connétable and deputy candidates, I've been going around the parish door to door over the past weeks, gaining even more insight into the issues that really matter to you. Talking about myself does not come naturally to me. I always find it hard to promote myself, but at election time, of course, that's a necessary evil. I am always conscious, as your elected representative, that everything I say and do reflects on this parish. There has been a tremendous amount of interest in this, the island's only contested election for Connétable, and I have been conducting a very positive campaign, focusing on what I've been able to achieve and on what I plan to achieve, building on that very real track record if I am re-elected. One question that came up repeatedly whilst door knocking was the issue of the Connétable in the States, and for that matter, what exactly the position of Connétable entails in this, the 21st century. So I'm going to start tonight by dealing with those 2 questions. Since time immemorial, the Connétable has been the head of the honorary system in the parish, head of the municipality, and also the representative of the parish as a body in the States Assembly. The only reason that the Connétables are said to be members of the States Assembly by virtue of their office is simply that their membership of the states predates the laws by which the deputies and the senators are elected. That Connétables are active states members is nothing new, however, and they have a history of full participation. In recent memory, several major committees have been chaired to great effect by Connétables. The role of the Connétable is not set in stone, and you might say even that they are actually the champions of reform in the Assembly. For example, it was the Connétables who first contemplated the move to a same-day election for all parishes. And of course, very recently, they took steps to remove their own direct policing powers in order to finally and clearly separate this function from their lawmaking powers as members of the legislature. I firmly believe that maintaining the position of Connétables in the States is vital if we are, for example, to safeguard the future of the honorary system, to ensure that the role of the parishes in delivering services is valued but not exploited, to ensure that our rate system remains in place, funding local services and at a level that parishioners can afford, because of course there is no test of the ability to pay. The Connétables cannot be there as mere window dressing. The size of the Assembly is contracting, and every elected member must be prepared to shoulder their fair share of the workload and to give value for money to the taxpayer. So what else do I do as your Connétable? Well, this is a busy parish, and on average I spend about 20 hours a week here in the parish hall, dealing with purely parish matters. I make executive decisions, taking advice as necessary from the relevant arms of the municipality, chairing committee meetings, and referring items for consideration at parish assemblies where necessary. I meet regularly with the chef de police to discuss matters under his jurisdiction, and also with the procureurs, who now have responsibility for all civil matters in my absence. Not that I'm often off the island for any length of time. In this way, we ensure that the parish affairs continue to function smoothly at all times. I'm also available, of course, to meet with parishioners to discuss any particular concerns or projects that they may need help with. Typically, this might involve a planning matter, a problem with the control of housing and work law, or perhaps a driving issue. Frequently, they just pop in to see me whilst they're at the parish hall for some other reason. And if I'm busy or not available, they can make an appointment that suits them, or I can visit them at their home or premises. A high proportion of my meetings with parishioners takes place in the evening, as this is more convenient for those who work outside the parish. I enjoy working directly with parishioners in this way, and the work is extremely varied, and that is what really makes the job so rewarding and so fulfilling. There are challenges ahead for the parishes, not least of which is the impending implementation of the Freedom of Information legislation, and I am using my experience gained whilst developing this law to establish a strategy for St Mary. This is just one way in which the considerable experience I have gained through the state side of my work can really assist the parish. I continually raise issues in the States: the impractical speed policy, the introduction of penalty points, the delayed road safety strategy, education, innovation, health, employment. These are all directly relevant to parishioners as well as the island as a whole. Whilst reading forthcoming propositions and doing the background research, as well as actually during the debates, I am always vigilant, looking for the effects that they might have on the parish. Recently, when amendments to the staff cost values for freedom of information applications was debated, I raised the fact in the States that whilst they were fine for large departments, they could effectively paralyse a small parish administration like our own, and the Chief Minister agreed to take that on board. Other benefits of my work in the States come from simple, regular interaction with ministers and officers, as well as this enabling me to put St Mary's viewpoint across in many different ways. There are also direct benefits to the parish. A small but typical example is that one day, on the day that our new police car was being shipped in, alongside a similar vehicle destined for the States Police, I discovered that although the States emergency vehicles do not attract GST, those for the honorary police do, and that simply didn't seem just. I happened to be in a budget briefing at the time, and I was able to approach the Treasury Minister and the Customs and Excise Chief Officer, and was able to persuade them to review this immediately. I had a positive response, and I was saving your money within hours. But quite apart from the work directly relevant to this parish, I am also, of course, a member of the Comité des Connétables. The Comité usually meets once a month with a broad agenda relating to such things as changes in legislation, honorary police matters, inquiries from third parties and charities, and all matters generally under the control of the Connétables. Arising from this work, each Connétable, working either alone or in small groups, takes responsibility for projects with which they have an affinity or a particular skill. Previously, I was involved with work on the public elections law, as this dovetailed with the work I had undertaken whilst on PPC. More recently, together with the Connétable of St Brelard, I've worked on the upgrade of the parish websites, taking the project forward with the State's Information Services Department and the chosen developers. As a knock-on from that work, we have also been meeting with the e-government project team because the parishes will have a very important part to play in delivering that initiative. Currently, I am looking at the listing of our historic parish churches and have had discussions on this with the Council of Ministers, the Dean and the Ecclesiastical Court. All of this work may take me out of the parish hall to meetings, but it is directly relevant to the parish and to my role as Connétable. So what else have I been doing in the parish for the last 3 years? Well, of course, the biggest single item has been the Village Centre Improvement Project. This really has been a substantial undertaking, and it has grown to encompass several long-standing issues that had been smouldering for some time. For decades, we have been trying to find a solution to the issue of traffic, which effectively bisects our parish. We have 2 parallel roads, which together form part of the highway from the east to the west of the island. And in a nutshell, if traffic is moving from one side of the island to the other, and it's not going through St Helier, then it's probably coming here through St Mary. A lot of this traffic is heavy. We have one of the island's major quarries in our parish on the St Peter border, and the other just over the border with St John. There is also a fairly constant movement of large agricultural vehicles travelling between the farms on one side and the depots on the other. Our roads simply weren't made to carry this traffic, and yet the volume has increased steadily over the years. In the 1990s, we addressed these issues in our village plan, and when I noticed that this plan was scheduled to be cancelled in the complex structure of the 2011 Island Plan, I successfully brought an amendment to ensure that the report would remain live. I then initially lobbied for funding to make improvements in the rural infrastructure, raising the matter in every possible debate, and was delighted when this was included in the island's first medium-term financial plan. Then my focus shifted to ensuring that some of this funding came in St Mary's direction, and my lobbying turned towards the TTS Minister. Eventually, St Mary rose to second place in the pecking order, and the race was on to get a scheme shovel-ready to begin work when the first scheme in St Aubin would be finished. Early last year, I formed a small project board inviting the deputy and a centeneer to join me, an architect, and specialist officers and engineers from TTS. We have worked well together as a team, and I'm sure you will all remember the several rounds of consultation that took place. And as a result of that, an expanded project board has now put together a very comprehensive plan, which deals with many of the issues raised. As I mentioned, there has also been the opportunity to tackle some other long-standing issues in the parish. For example, I am hopeful that the visibility display at the entrance to the arsenal will be greatly improved, and also we've been able to address some of the negative aspects experienced following the recent change of speed limit on Rue des Buttes, especially around the school. I am hopeful that as many of you as possible will come along tomorrow to see the proposals before we move to the planning application phase, so that you can see what we hope to achieve. This is only the beginning. Working on this project has given me an insight as to how to tackle similar problems in other areas of the parish, and I am already working on more ideas. I have other irons in the fire too. For example, again, working collaboratively with neighbouring constables, and this time with Liberty Bus, we are about to launch a community transport scheme which will link outlying areas of our parishes with the main bus network. On a financial level, I have started to set aside funds each year to assist people undertaking voluntary work in the parish with any particular elements of that work which they find beyond their skill set or beyond their means. Voluntary work has long been at the core of the parish life, and there are several key areas in which this work is especially strong. The management and maintenance of the Youth and Community Centre is one which rapidly springs to mind, and I'm very pleased to say that they have been able to use some of this funding to pay for specialist assistance with a couple of their projects. There are other volunteers out there in the community, however. For example, I'm extremely grateful that one couple has recently adopted the Millennium Cross, and that is now looking very neat and tidy. Perhaps this funding can further enhance that area. I will be publicising the availability of these funds more widely to encourage more volunteer participation. And already there's a possibility that a group is coming forward to create planted floral displays in key areas. This is just the sort of project that funding can help to kickstart. The parish philosophy has always been to look ahead to capital projects and to spread the funding over a couple of years in order to keep the impact on ratepayers to a minimum. At the moment, the parish is funding improvements to the exterior facilities at the community centre, including the provision of an outside toilet, which will be available to users of the grounds when the centre itself is not open. This is just the first step in further improving facilities, and I'm sure many of you will have seen that the Management Committee is hoping to provide play equipment. I hope this will encourage more and more young families to use this fabulous facility. The parish owns and has responsibility for St Mary's Church, and the recent 5-yearly inspection has highlighted some works that are required there over the next few years. I'm working as a member of the Rectorat Committee to schedule these works at the optimum time. Much of the expense involved will be down to providing safe access for workmen, and so it is necessary to ensure that whilst the scaffolding is in place, we tackle as many jobs as we can at one time. I am pleased that I was able to redirect some surplus funds previously set aside for specific projects which came in under budget towards setting up a healthy reserve for this work without having to increase the rate. It has been an incredible honour to serve the parish as Connétable, and I feel the responsibility keenly. I am always aware that there are those who seek to criticise the parish system and who would latch upon any opportunity or weakness in order to discredit it. I strive to put St Mary in a positive light by every action that I take and by every statement that I make. St Mary has been at the heart of everything I've done since I first became involved in the parish in the 1980s, and particularly since I started work in the parish hall in the year 2000. I am the candidate with a proven track record in parish administration, diligent and effective work in the parish, and political achievement and experience in the States. I have worked hard on your behalf, on behalf of the parish, and also on behalf of the island. With me, you will see no change there. I have no intention of slowing down. I humbly ask you to support me and to return me as your Connétable so that I can continue to work on your behalf here at the heart of the parish. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliet. John, it's your turn.
Monsieur Procureur, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a privilege to serve the parishioners of this parish as your deputy for the past 3 years. Prior to that, I served in an honorary capacity with the parish as constable's officer, centenier and roads inspector. On being elected, the first duty in the State's Assembly is to elect our government, our ministers. On the appointment of our Chief Minister, Senator Gorst, I made it known to him that I did not want to sit in the Assembly as a backbencher with no commitments, but wished to serve in some capacity on a board or panel. He offered me the chance to serve on the State's Employment Board. I gratefully accepted. However, it was not an appointment. I had to be elected by the Assembly against other candidates within that Assembly. I won that election and was duly appointed to the board, which comprised the Chief Minister, the Assistant Treasury Minister, the Housing Minister, the Constable of St Lawrence and myself. The working relationship that we have had over the past 3 years, not just on the board, but with our human resources executive officers, has been totally positive and cohesive. We have achieved extensive changes to work patterns and wage negotiations with the many unions within the state's workforce by working together. That work is ongoing with the introduction of a workforce modernisation plan, which is now being implemented to make all departments more cost-effective. States workers' pensions are also being revised, as the current pension pot is emptying far too quickly due to the change in demographics. A lot of people are receiving pensions for longer periods than the actual working life within the states, and we shall all have to face those issues, as this is also having an effect on social security pensions. Because of my building experience, I was also invited to be a member of the Health and Social Security Housing Scrutiny Panel. We undertook the task of reviewing the Housing Transformation Programme, which was to look at states' housing rental charges. It was considered that many people were having their rents unfairly subsidised by us, the taxpayer, when they could afford to pay a more realistic rent based on their income, or in fact move to a private sector or even buy a property which would release their unit to a desperate family. Since then, the Housing Department has become ADM Homes, which is a states-funded company, and a massive renovation and expansion program is now underway. Affordable homes are constantly talked about. However, the average affordable home at £450,000 is totally unaffordable by the average working couple working in the trades or service industries. I've personally met with the Planning Minister and Housing Minister in order to prove that houses can be constructed at a more realistic £300,000, and this has been accepted as being achievable on state-owned land. However, every decision creates a problem, and the worry here is negative equity to existing housing. The solution is currently being addressed by the Law Department. This new category of housing will be subject to stringent controls. It will not be possible to sell these properties on at a profit, as they will only incur inflation cost should they be sold. Potential purchasers will also have to fit the right criteria. I am very optimistic that this will be achieved in the very near future. In relation to this, I also served on the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel with regard to population and migration. Many aspects of migration evolve around building contracts with the larger developers importing cheap labour. Having had first-hand experience of this, including the practices adopted by some of these developers to evade the system by keeping below the radar of social security and also our Jersey income tax. Some of our panel recommendations have been adopted, but there is still more to be done in order to safeguard local employment. The most recent scrutiny panel, which I was part of, the Environment Scrutiny Panel, again enabled me to use my building experience. The terms of reference were very varied. This involved a new wastewater management renewal program at Ballazan, a revised radon gas evaluation, and the introduction of cycle helmets for youngsters. Unfortunately, we still had unspecified work which we would have liked to review relating to environment, energy, grants, which are being paid to property owners who perhaps should not have received payments. Also, the need to question the Heritage Department's stance on applying listings to buildings of no public interest and assessing replacement windows and doors to properties, which would enable people to avoid costly maintenance and also result in reduced energy bills in the process. I hope these issues are taken up by the next panel. Over the last 3 years, I've appreciated how vital and important that the role of scrutiny performs. It is necessary in order to get checks and balances required in government departments before legislation is introduced. That said, not all of scrutiny panel reports are accepted or adopted, but usually points that have been made which may have been overlooked and criticism given on department proposals are normally taken on board, or compromise is found, and of course that is the nearest we can get to transparency within our government. We also need to use that as an example of best practices across our parish administrations. The experience of working closely with states departments and top personnel has been immensely valuable in understanding the problems encountered within government. However, having resigned myself to stand for constable, I would not contemplate taking such an active role within the states itself if successful, as I believe a constable should be dedicated foremost to parish issues. This can only be done by focusing totally on the parish. A question that you will be asked in this election with regard to reform is, do you wish the constable to retain the automatic right to sit in the States Assembly? At the moment, I believe that the answer is yes, because they bring stability to our government. However, should reform proposals eventually change that, I would still be prepared to stand as constable only, if that became necessary, even in an unpaid role, as I am not standing to be a career politician, which nowadays is extremely rare. Reform issues are extremely worrying as to the future makeup of our parish system. The prospect of having our parish being amalgamated with other parishes in order to achieve a proportional vote throughout the island will destroy the parish system as we know it. Voting in larger constituencies will mean you will lose your individual parish deputy, further eroding any input by a deputy within your parish, and I am very surprised that propositions have been taken to the states in recent months attempting to amalgamate St Mary, St John, Trinity and a St Helier district for that purpose. If propositions are taken to the states which affect our parish boundaries, our constitution or the electorate of the parish in any way, that should only be put forward after a meeting with and having approval of parishioners. When canvassing for election for deputy 3 years ago, all three candidates were told quite firmly by parishioners that their biggest concern was speeding traffic. This applied to all areas of the parish, but in particular to La Rue de Butte, as these residents were constantly at risk when walking to the shop or waiting for a bus. Part of that problem seems to have been removed. Unfortunately, it seems to be the bus. Though there are intentions for Liberty Bus to provide the northern parishes with a self-drive minibus to reach outlying areas, our environment panel were party to the initial meeting with Liberty Bus to discuss their intentions and their wish to encourage parish-based volunteer drivers in order to operate the scheme, and discussions are ongoing. On being elected, the speeding issue became my prime objective. After many meetings with TTS, they indicated that any change could only be achieved with approval of the parish. As parishioners were demanding action, a meeting was then arranged with TTS, which, as you know, received an overwhelming response from parishioners, especially in the Rue de Bert area, for a reduced speed limit to 20 mile an hour. That is what we eventually ended up with, after enduring a long wait in order to determine whether the alternative of a chicane system would be sufficient on its own. And there are still ongoing problems with this, which will only be resolved when they are finally removed on completion of our eagerly awaited village road scheme. However, the new village road calming project, which is to be commenced shortly, will revolutionise the way people drive through St Mary, and this should make a pleasant experience for everyone. The funding for this has come through the states, and individually both the Constable and myself have each put pressure on TTS and the Treasury Minister to achieve this. And as a member of the St Mary Project Board, it has been rewarding to actually provide input to the scheme. This will not be the end of our road problems. Our new scheme will need to be evaluated occasionally and may be tweaked in order to maximise efficiency to traffic flow. We also have other areas in the parish which require attention. At Greb de Lec and La Grande Rue, it is not just parishioners who use these roads, but many island hikers and tourists who wish to appreciate the beauty of our parish in peace and tranquility and safety. Having been involved with the building industry all my life, I don't count the last 3 years as your deputy as part of my working life. For 45 of those years I was self-employed. Therefore, my business experience has given me a good grounding in providing value for money. During that time, I prepared estimates, quotations based on my own quantity surveying. I also prepared working drawings for detailed works. Working with a whole spectrum of people from labourers, tradesmen, clients on a tight budget to money no object 11Ks required patience, understanding and compassion. And the link between all of that is understanding that everyone is equal. Only money and jobs divide us, but working together bonds us. These skills provide me with the ability to safeguard the interests of your parish. Thank you.
Right, now it's your turn. David Munns has got the roving microphone, so if you want to ask a question, would you wait until he comes and gives it to you? The answers are not going to be time restricted as they were at the senatorial hustings, but if they go on too long or deviate too much from the subject, they might get a tap with a hammer. So, right, let's go with the first question, please. Yes, Glenn.
Good evening, my name's Glenn Power. Can I ask candidates, please?
Hang on, wait for David.
Good evening. What will your first action be if elected in the parish?
John, as Juliet kicked off first, would you like to answer that question first?
I can do. I think my first action would be to get all the members of the various committees together, discuss things, and hopefully take things forward to parishioners' requirements. We need to discuss things first in order to move on.
Thank you, Glyn. I think probably my first action will probably be to cry. I think I should be very emotional because it means an awful lot to me. Well, obviously there are things that I already have in train, which I just want to carry on working through, the Village Centre Improvement Project, other things like that. But it's been a useful experience to go door to door, getting more information. I have found a couple of really rather concerning things which are in certain areas of the parish. One particular, which I can't go into here because it's very confidential, but it's really made me realise that there are some issues that you wouldn't really associate with St Mary's that are starting to appear. And so my first thing will be to have a meeting with the relevant agency. I mean, I will do that. I will pass that information on anyway, but that would be one of the very important things I would do. But certainly, you know, to take forward into the work I'm already doing, what I've learned on the door-knocking expedition.
Next, please. Next question. Yes, Mr. Drew.
Can I ask the candidates, please? Currently, the parish hall is only open Monday to Friday, 9 till 1 for drop-in visitors. Would either of the candidates give consideration to supporting a move to extend the hours, perhaps by including an afternoon or an evening, so that those those parishioners who are working during the day would have an alternative time when they could pop in?
Thank you. Yes, in fact, that's something that we have done in the past. When I was parish secretary, the parish hall was open in the evening, and I did open it in the afternoons on certain occasions. It's simply a question of the evening opening particularly. There was never anybody coming. And it was found to be much easier to offer an out-of-hours appointment to anybody who had a particular requirement. For example, if somebody phones up and says, you know, I need to bring a driving licence first application, I need to prove my identity, then I will meet with them after hours to do that. So it's really a question of demand, but certainly from time to time we have mooted it again. But you know, certainly we're very amenable to meeting the parishioners' needs. That's what the parish hall is for.
Yes, following up on that, that's been a question that I've been asked quite a lot on canvassing. Why can't the parish hall be open perhaps on afternoons? Because it would be far more convenient for a lot of people, especially after 3:30, when they finished work early, to actually pop in and get their bits and pieces attended to at that time. Other than that, I think we'd need to actually find how many people would really require any further times for the parish hall to open, because as Juliet says, it is probably far easier to make an appointment for individuals. Thank you.
Okay, next question, please. Come on, don't be shy. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Les Stanton. Got a written question, actually. Unusually for this type of election, you are both currently States members. I'm a taxpayer and have paid part of the 135,000 plus expenses you've been entitled to claim in the past 3 years by way of States members' remuneration. Do you feel you have both provided a value for money? I would also be interested to know if you have both taken the full salary. As I note from the deputy, he said at his last hustings that he was in favour of a graduated pay scale for members according to their experience and position.
I still hold those views. I think it's very unfair that all States Assembly members, regardless of responsibility and position, are all paid the same. I think the way to tackle that is to actually pay States members what is considered the average wage, and then add by increments according to workload and responsibility. Because it's totally unfair that our chief ministers, our departmental ministers are getting the same kind of salary as a backbencher who very often, and there's not many of them, but there are a few that do absolutely nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I do consider I give value for money. I work as hard as I possibly can. In this last assembly, previously, I've got 3 terms behind me, so I've had a wide experience. But previously, I was president of a major committee, and this time, when I was re-elected, I decided, because I had already started this village centre improvement project, that I needed to focus a lot more here. So I was offered, I was nominated for a ministry, and I turned that down in order to focus on other things. That doesn't mean that I haven't been very active. I'm still president of the Assemblée Parlementaire. I work on the planning applications panel, and I've done a lot of individual reviews that I've been able to slot in at time to time when I've had time from the parish work to do that. I was on the Electoral Commission. Very importantly at the moment, I'm on the Access to Justice review, which is looking at really crucial issues as to how the ordinary man on the street can access fair justice. But as I say, I've decided to focus definitely my attentions this time. I, like John, was offered a position on the Estates Employment Board, and I didn't take that because I knew my capacity. Having had experience before, I know what I'm able to do. As regards the salary, well, I'll be honest, I have taken the full salary, but I think I've earned every penny that I've taken. The States Members Remuneration Board was tasked way back when States Members were first paid to set the remuneration level at a level which would not impede any normal person from from deciding to seek election. And I think we have to accept that the level they've set over the years, and in fact it hasn't really increased an awful lot over the time that I've been in the States, is the level that States members require in order to attract people into the States. I do think that some level of differentiated pay is necessary, but the moves that have happened in the past to make it have been at the expense of reducing the salary for other States members. And I think it's a difficult economic climate to add any more money into the pot, but if the States Members Remuneration Board have, for at least the last 9 years, set the level at a certain level, I think it's crazy now to think that suddenly it could be less and still attract people into the States. So I hope that answers your question.
I'm sorry, just follow on. Do you think possibly a higher salary would get a better quality of States member into the States? You know, Jersey should be run like a PLC. It's not being run like a PLC. You could argue some PLCs aren't run it accordingly anyway. But at this current salary, you're not going to get the high calibre of States member to move the island forward, and that's what we're lacking.
That is exactly it. It's easy for a lot of people who've reached a level of employment to double their money overnight to get into the States. But the real people that we want running the States are people that are top accountants and top business people, earning well over 150,000 a year. And it's impossible to encourage those people down to a level that the States pay, because they have mortgages and they live their life to that commitment of salary. So I don't think we'll ever encourage those top people down unless they've retired.
I think there's an element of fact about that, because it's interesting. People don't seem to value the work that States members do. There's always an outcry every time there's a pay review. They say, oh, they shouldn't be paid at all. Well, it's interesting to go into a meeting where you are effectively in charge, and every other single person, including the person who's doing the recording of that meeting, is earning more than you are, and there's a level of respect to be had. However, we are in very difficult times, and I think it's unrealistic to expect that more money can be put into States members' salary pot at the moment. And I think there is still a huge amount of, what can I say, it's not like honorary, but there is a tradition of serving as well. And it's true that States members, certain people earn a lot more than they could as States members. But then you look at the Crown officers and you see their salaries compared to what they could earn in private practice. It's a drop in the ocean. People don't only do it for the money. What we need to be sure is that people who want to do it can do it without any loss of detriment to their family.
Right, next please. Would you like to stand up so we can see you when you ask a question? Thank you.
If you were elected, how would you help the youth of St Mary progress?
Thank you. Actually, we've had discussions recently concerning future direction that the youth project could take. St Mary's has had a youth club for quite some time, and a year or so ago it sort of reformulated into a youth project with much more coordination with the States of Jersey youth service. And I've seen there are some fantastic opportunities that youngsters in this island can have, and not everything can be offered at our youth project. So I've been discussing with them how perhaps we could rechannel some of our focus, and perhaps offer facilities for drop-in sort of it's like a clubhouse type of thing for the older ones who've gone through the youth project. There are a lot of things available for youngsters, but we need to offer more. There's been an awful lot of sadness in the island recently in certain areas of the community where youngsters have, some have taken their own lives, thankfully nothing in this parish, but it makes you focus on the fact that there are pressures on our young people today that perhaps weren't around when we were younger. And I think we need to really see what we can do to support them and to offer more for them.
We have a fantastic facility next door in the community centre, but it's no good having a community centre if you don't use it to the full. We have youngsters now which are coming there which cannot take part in all their activities because the supervising officer, youth worker, has not got qualifications in order to do that. So sometimes it's necessary to have to pay for youth workers in order that that work can continue. If we don't, those youngsters suffer. This has happened quite recently. For instance, there was a fantastic trampoline at the centre which has had to be sold because we haven't got a youth worker with the qualifications in order to give the supervision for the children to use that. So, although we have a very high degree of volunteers in St Mary, not everything can be done on a volunteer basis. We have to accept, we do have to pay for some form of supervision and education, whether it was given previously by a volunteer or not. That's just something the parish is going to have to do.
Next, please. Yes, sir.
Will the candidates please tell us their opinion of social media and its relevance to our elected representatives, and also what social media do they use and why?
I use very little social media. I tend to answer emails, return emails, do most of my correspondence on a laptop. I get very little time to get into other things like Twitter and Facebook and that kind of thing. It's not part of my everyday life, so I don't use it. That said, I think we should adopt technology as and where we need it. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm using technology where I need it.
Thank you. There's a couple of aspects to that question. Relevance to states members. Well, in the past, when I was on PPC, we saw a lot of misuse of social media and a lot of trolling and online bullying by, unfortunately, some elected representatives. And I think that there is a responsibility. I think people let it run away with them sometimes. They don't perhaps intentionally mean to do things, but there's a level of responsibility that perhaps needs to be reinforced in states members. Personally, I have a Facebook account, but I keep it private. I've been very surprised in the past how easily the permissions for Facebook change when they upgrade. And I use it basically for, just swapping photos with relatives overseas. But I am a great fan of Twitter. I think it's a fabulous way to spread information very quickly. And I think it's the use in the island is amazing. We get our news bulletins. We know where there's accidents on the roads and how to avoid them. We know when the buses are running late because Liberty Bus use Twitter. I think it's a fabulous way, a fabulous tool to communicate. And at the heart of it all, states members have an absolute duty to communicate with their electorate as often and as fully as they can. We suffer in this island from a lack of engagement between the public and politicians, and I think that any way we can make them more accessible to the public is a good thing.
Okay, next question, please. Nick, there's nobody in there wants to come through? Somebody at the back. The lady.
Following on from the question about dealing with the needs of like the younger people, and also the social media one, do you feel that maybe using like things like Twitter and Facebook is a better way to interact with young people and like get their opinions about things, because they're less likely to attend like meetings at the parish hall and things like that?
Thank you. Yes, I do. I think it's a great way to interact with people. I've had quite a few comments actually on Twitter. In fact, I'm finding it quite hard to keep up at the moment. But it certainly is a way in. Youngsters these days are literally glued to their laptops or their iPads. Wherever they go, they have them. And if they see something that bothers them, they feel it's okay to contact people. There's a movement at the moment, started with some students at Jersey College for Girls, to set up a youth parliament here. And I've had some fantastic meetings with them. And they are so switched on and so clued up. They are spreading information amongst themselves. It's like a viral network is happening. And I can't believe that in a space of 18 months, I've seen this develop from almost nothing to something that is really exciting, where they really are on the verge of setting up their own youth parliament. I think it's fabulous. And it's all becoming accessible across the island because they're all talking on social media. I think it's a brilliant idea.
I'll take a bit of an opposite view on that. Most of the things that you see on Twitter don't need to be said. And if they do, and there's something important, then people normally pick up a telephone to me because it's of a very personal nature. They don't want it spread. So I wouldn't use Twitter. If people need to contact me, I'm on the end of a telephone. Very discreet, very private. I don't have time to walk around twiddling about with a Twitter account all day.
Okay. Sorry, Ronnie. Just behind you there.
Don't even need to get up to it. Good evening. There's a growing movement and demand throughout the island and throughout other areas of the world to create allotments for people that want to grow their own food and don't have land available to do so. I'd like to ask the candidates, if elected, would they support looking into this being created within St Mary's, possibly using glebe fields around the rectory and using funds that are available within the parish to create this for parishioners?
I think that could be an excellent idea. We've got quite a few small housing estates in that area with very small gardens which aren't suitable for growing vegetables. And something like that could easily be constructed and made a lot of good use of. Obviously, it has to go through the landowner, but whether you're growing crops or whether you're having allotments, if they're getting a return rental on it, why not?
Excuse me, I do apologise, I do have a bit of a sore throat. Allotments are something that have been looked into at the parish in the past. We did some research about 5 years ago. We had some inquiries, but actually, quite perversely, the people who wanted allotments were the people who already had quite large gardens. At that time, we were looking at, they just apparently didn't want them to be vegetable gardens. We were looking at, not so much on the glebe field, because there are lots of hurdles to be crossed there, because there has to be a permission from the bishop, permission from the lieutenant governor, ecclesiastical assemblies, etc. And also, the permanent transfer of use would be quite difficult. But we were looking at one of the Clos des Pauvres, one of the charity fields. But simply, at the end of the day, the demand wasn't there. We had about 4 or 5 applications. But actually, it's something that's been on the list to recirculate. Obviously, from time to time, things change, and we need to perhaps do that again. But we have done it in the past, and there was very little request.
Next question, please. Anybody say a bit more?
Well, I asked the two candidates their views on gay marriage.
You may.
Ooh, that's interesting. Okay. Okay. Gay marriage. Let's see. Let me look up one of my speeches. I don't actually think about it as gay marriage. I have to say, what I'm interested in is equal marriage, because there are lots of things that are applicable to homosexual couples that aren't applicable to heterosexual couples. You can't, for instance, have a civil partnership if you're heterosexual. I think we need to look at it both ways. There was a proposition about 2-3 months ago now to look into civil equal marriage, and I voted in support of that, because basically at the end of the day I completely and utterly abhor any kind of prejudice, any kind of discrimination, and I just think it's incredibly sad that even now we have to label people and think that way. But there are lots of considerations here. I think Jersey was particularly wise to move to civil partnerships about 4 or 5 years ago as a sort of transitional step. Because much as we understand that for the current generation, for my daughter's generation, for my son's generation, it's not even an issue. Things have moved incredibly quickly in this area, and there are some of the older people who haven't really come to terms with it fully yet and are still working towards it. And I think what we need to do is work on civil marriage. And then there's all sorts of aspects. You know, there's a consultation going on at the moment. I'm a member of the Church of England, and I've naturally discussed this with the rector and with the church wardens. And I understand that there are implications for the church, and it needs to be handled carefully. But having said that, I'm not a fan, I don't think at this stage, having looked at the initial consultation of union civile as an answer, I think that brings other problems. But actually, yes, I did vote in favour of civil equal marriage, and I stand by anything that will remove prejudice from our everyday lives.
We do have civil marriage, but we don't actually have equal marriage. And that legislation needs to be adopted so that everybody is equal in that respect. However, there's still a great divide between civil marriage and equal marriage and marriage in the church. The marriage in the church issue is ongoing. It's being addressed at the moment by the Dean, and as the church is part of our constitution, that's not something that can be addressed purely by political purpose. It has to come through the church, because although the civil and equal marriage are recognised, marriage in the church is not recognised at the moment between two people of the same gender.
What's your personal view?
My personal view is if people actually think that that's what we should have, then that should go through. You know, I don't have a personal issue with it, apart from keeping to the rulings of the church at the moment until it's changed.
Right, got plenty of time. Yes, there's somebody. Ken Lamarco. Come to you next, sir.
What is the opinion of the two candidates regarding splitting the island into 4 constituents without even discussing it with any of the parishioners? Thank you.
You're obviously referring to the proposed larger constituencies. This is a big concern for reform. But most people that I've spoken to, not just in St Mary, but right throughout the island, do not want these big super constituencies. Once we start doing that, it's definitely going to erode our parish system as we know it. And I don't think any proposition should go to the States unless it's approved by that parish to include them in that constituency.
Well, this is interesting because I was a member of the Electoral Commission, as many of you will know, We did an awful lot of consultation. We produced 2 reports. We visited every parish hall. And at the end of the process, there was a referendum. So to say there hasn't been any consultation is, I think, strange. But the move to larger constituencies was mooted originally because of the electorate's feelings that there was a need for a broad mandate and the difficulties in having senatorial elections with a general election. That's how it all came about. It wasn't literally pulled out of thin air. It was a proposition. It was an idea that was produced at the interim report stage from the Electoral Commission and was then sent around in the second consultation phase around all the parishes. And we had, I think, I can't remember the exact number, but an unprecedented number of submissions and consultation replies. So it was a very well consulted on document. In the end of the day, there can be no higher test, in my opinion, than to put something to the electorate. And it was put to the electorate. And this parish and the island as a whole made the move to change. The difficulty with not changing is that change is going to come, and it may not be the change that we as parishioners have wanted. This is the sort of area where you need to play the long game, where you need to see what will happen if you don't change, and you need to say whether that is better or worse than the change that you can actually effect for yourselves. As a result of the rejection of the last referendum, we actually almost ended up with having 1 parish representative only. I don't mean 1 parish representative plus your deputies in wider constituencies. I don't mean 1 parish representative plus your senators. I mean 1 representative only, because that's what the clothier proposals that were going to come into the next referendum would have meant for St Mary's. And I don't think, having been involved in this at the very early stages when clothier was first mooted, and having been at a parish meeting here at that time, and having seen the reaction to having 14 votes reduced to 1, I think that was something that this parish really did not want to see.
David, the gentleman standing up on your right.
Would you support Senator Gorst to be re-elected as Chief Minister?
Thank you. To just put it on the record, I was one of the people who nominated Senator Gorst for his election at the last time. At the moment, I don't know which other candidates have declared. I think Alan McLean has declared. I don't know which other candidates will come forward. On the basis of what I know at the moment, yes, I would support him again.
My views are entirely similar. I voted for Senator Gorst last time round. He's done an excellent job as far as I'm concerned. There probably will be 2 people putting their hat in the ring this time. That'll be Senator Gorst and Alan McLean. Both candidates are excellent, and we have to see which one goes forward.
Any more questions, please? Last chance. Yes.
I've been asked by a gentleman who's young at heart, but I think our most senior parishioner.
Hang on, there's a microphone.
Ask this question.
What is the candidate's opinion that a law be introduced as follows? All school children's winter jackets and school bags or rucksacks to have a visible reflective strip permanently attached, and if you are in favour, would you be prepared to bring such a proposition before the States Assembly?
That certainly sounds like a good idea in the northern parishes where we don't have street lighting. Perhaps that should come from the schools, a recommendation from the schools first. But it does make sense, and I'm sure a lot of parents are already adopting that attitude now. It's not an expensive option to keep your child safe.
Thank you. That's a really interesting question because actually I did do something about this in the past. some time ago when my daughter was at Lake Kenneveigh, they changed the uniform. And I was staggered to see that it was just dark blue everywhere. As a sort of, I'm not very active now, but as a motorcyclist, every item of clothing that I had reflective bits in it that you didn't actually know were reflective. They weren't like the big yellow stripes. They were just fabric, things woven into the fabric that made them reflective. And I just couldn't see why something as simple as that wasn't done. Because I know from experience that you can give a child something reflective, you can give them a torch, you can do anything for this child, but if that child's friends are busy doing something and it leaves it behind, they're not going to come back to get the reflective item. They're not going to wear it if it's not cool, if it's got big yellow jackets all over it. Although I have to say that the youngsters these days at preschool are so used to going out in their little fluorescent jackets that it is actually catching on. But I did actually make inquiries as to why, when those uniforms were changed, something wasn't done to make something built into that fabric, because it really is not difficult.
Any more questions, please? Ivan.
What is your view on keeping the senators in the States?
It's Juliet John.
Sorry. The senatorial position is extremely important. The difficulty with the senators is it's how you elect them all on one day, which is why the numbers have been reduced. As it stands at the moment with 8 senators, it's workable. We have 18 candidates at the moment, I think, don't we now, for 8 positions. In the past, we've had 21 candidates for 6, so it's no greater now than it was then. But whilst there is no other wide form of mandate, in other words, if we haven't got the super constituency, or the large electoral districts as they're actually called, if we haven't broadened our mandate in some way, then it's essential that the role of senator stays. But if things change in a much more open way, if we do move to wider districts, then the role of senator will become, in fact, the role of the deputy will become equated to the senatorial role. It will be a wide role. And the reason for that is it's important that we don't just discuss local issues, that we discuss things that are relevant in the parishes and in the island as a whole. We have an international representation. Some candidates have to step up to the mark and show themselves with a broad mandate. Senatorial mandate is the most democratic, but it simply is unworkable. We've looked at it every which way you can. Guernsey's looked at it. It's impossible to elect every member island-wide on one day. It would just be not possible. And statistics show, I hate statistics, but they do show that there is a limit to the number of people you can actually vote, you can actually return in one day. And it's quite likely that the people who are elected at the end of the spectrum would have a very, very small percentage of the vote, probably less than the deputies in some of the small constituencies now. So we really need to be electing people with a broad mandate.
I think the problem with the senators is just that. We elect them all on one day. People tell me that they want their senators back. They actually want 12 senators. Now, these days that would almost be impossible to elect on one day. When we have, for 8 senators to be elected, we have 18 people standing. So why is it that we do it all on the one day? It would be better to have the senators split in half, 6 running perhaps a 3 or 4 year term, with another 6 following after that. So you'd have a continuation process going on as well. So you'd overlap. Then you wouldn't need to have everybody on the one day at all. You could actually split it and run a longer term for senators.
Yes,
What are your own priorities for the parish of St Mary, if you're elected?
One of the things I'm told about constantly is actually drainage. People are unfairly penalised for a lot of payments for drainage. People that can't get connected to main drains because there's no main drains in the vicinity. If they have a minor alteration to their house, they need to have a tight tank. And that's just an excuse for the TTS to come along and empty your tank far more frequently. So where people would have had a soakaway and a tank emptied once a year, they're now emptying once a month. Now there's a lot of unfairness there because our general taxes pay for the main drains. So people who are having to pay for these extra empties are paying twice. They're being taxed twice, and a lot more than twice on the ratio of the payments. And I think that's one of the first issues to address. That and providing fresh piped water, because Waterworks Company do not want to make a loss on putting it down to areas where it's going to cost too much. But surely they must be obliged to do so. It's part of everybody's requirement to have fresh water. If you have fresh water, you don't get pollution with drains either. So we have to have one or the other. I'm going to make that a priority.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, I've made it quite clear in all my campaign literature that infrastructure improvements are the most important thing. I'm not just talking about mains, drains and water, although they are incredibly important, but I'm talking about the roadways. I'm talking about making sure that people have safe paths to walk on. I'm also incredibly interested in, having followed on an earlier question, in what we can do for our youth. I'd like to see us doing more. I'd like to see, because it is very difficult, although we do have a fantastic youth and community centre, it's incredibly hard to actually get a regular booking in there. The youth project is already in there, but if you want to do extra things, it's quite difficult because it's so popular that it's so well used. That's why tonight, for what we thought was going to be a very well-attended meeting, we're in here, because there's been things in the community centre. So there are initiatives that I have in mind to redevelop some other areas of the parish where the youth can have their own resources.
Anybody else, please? Yes, hang on. There's a lady.
Could I have your views on property tax, please?
On what?
On property.
Property
tax, please.
This is Juliet.
Are you referring to the Green Paper initiative that's out at the moment?
Yes.
Okay. It's a very complex issue, but just to cut it down in a nutshell, I am very concerned that we need to keep a watch on what happens there. But what the Green Paper is precisely that. It's a consideration of options. We've been looking at, for some time, at areas where people generally feel there is a lot of inequality. There is no windfall tax. If something happens to rezone a piece of land, somebody can make a big profit suddenly on some land that was inaccessible before. We don't benefit as an island from that. We know that there have been proposals on the table for some time to recoup some of the tax that's going out of the island because companies aren't resident here, they're not paying the taxes. And there were some initiatives put forward, I think 3 or 4 years ago by Durac Blampier, I think, to actually look at whether we could use property and property base to actually recoup some of the tax that's fleeing the island. I'm very, very concerned that we keep control of our rates, that we don't centralise too much, because once we lose control of that, we really, there's no way that we can keep a tab and no way that we'll get it back. But in fairness to the Treasury Department who've put this paper out, it is simply answering a call from all sections of the government to lay on the table what the options are so that we can have a mature discussion. Some of the things in there are really worth considering, but some of them I am watching like a hawk because I think they could affect St Mary's. But it is a green paper, it's there for discussion, and I will be making my representations known.
I think at the moment any form of extra tax, especially on property, should be fiercely resisted. The possibility of putting on commercial properties is totally different. But I know the Treasury Minister wants to exclude commercial properties because of generating income in the island. This certainly isn't so when you've got two potato boards, two potato companies now who operate outside the island, and there's very little tax paid by either of them. So it looks like we're all going to be penalised on this property tax in some way, and it needs to be really checked and actually resisted.
Mark?
Having been out on the streets walking and talking to the residents, we've still got roads in the parish that are 40 miles an hour. You've spoken of Rue and down at Road to Lake, but there's still roads, Rue de Bel Air, where we come out of 20 straight into a 40, but there's still residents on that area. We're both candidates look at talking to the ministers and bringing that down to a 30 mile an hour speed limit where there's residential areas.
That makes perfect sense. Speed should be graduated, and going from 40 to a 30 to a 20 makes far more sense. Majority of our roads in St Mary are not practical at 40 miles an hour. Some of our smaller roads are still 40 mile an hour when we've got Rue de Bout, which is a dangerous road because it hasn't got pavements, at a 20. The whole road scheme in St Mary needs revising, and I believe TTS are looking at that island-wide anyway.
Thank you. Yeah, I have been pursuing this in the States. I've asked questions. I asked some only last month about what was happening to our speed limit policy. It was due to be debated, I think, nearly 4 years ago now. It was withdrawn, and then it was supposed to come back during this last assembly, and it hasn't. I know TTS have been incredibly busy on other things, but this really does take a priority. It's not simply a question of lowering speed limits. Our speed limit policy itself is bizarre. There are too many limits. People don't know whether they're in a 10, a 15, a 20, a 30, a 40. And that leads to a proliferation of signs. We need to really streamline it. It needs a root and branch review. But the important thing, especially as St Mary's is concerned, is to understand that changing the speed limit doesn't make the road safer. It only does that when people obey the limits, and we can only enforce the speed limits a certain amount of the time. What really makes a difference, what they found in the UK when they made 20 mile an hour zones, for example, a zone isn't just a change in speed limit, it's a change with associated traffic calming, and that's what really makes the difference. That's how the scheme that we're working on at the moment is going to make the changes. There are going to be changes in texture, changes in road width. You're going to know that you're entering an area where there are likely to be people. It's going to be much more effective, and it has to be effective to make a difference. The worst thing you can do is make people feel they're safer, when in fact they're not. And what we really need to do is engineer the roads better. It's
I mean, roads outside the main area.
Absolutely. But as you say that it's at the end of Rue de Bel Air where the 20 finishes and the 40 starts. But if you talk to people at that top end of the road in the 20, they're not finding the cars are doing 20. They're not finding much difference at all. We have to slow the traffic rather than just change the speed limit. You have to look at the big picture. Otherwise, it's just not going to have any effect. But yeah, absolutely, I am committed, and I have been all the way through to making the roads actually safer. Most of the problems we had on la Rue des Buttes were not caused by speeding. They were caused by bad junction layout, which I tackled successfully at the Bethlehem Junction. And that has been changed, and we've had nothing but good reports about that. There hasn't been another incident. But the rest of it was either drugs or drink influencing driving. We had a tragic death fatality there where everybody in the vehicle was inebriated. But making changes to the layout is what really makes the difference.
Yes, lady at the back
Can I ask candidates how they feel about scrapping GST on food items and children's clothing?
Well, I'm on record about this because it's been debated since I've been in the States. It simply isn't practical with a low rate of GST to make this level of exemption. It costs too much to administer, and so the cost of collection outweighs the cost benefit to the Treasury. The only way to counter that is what we don't want, is to put the GST rate up on other items. I've always said, whilst GST remains low, that it's better to be simple. If at any time a proposition came to make GST more, charge it at a higher rate, then I would certainly reevaluate my opinions. I think, I can't remember, I looked into this at great detail when it was debated a couple of years ago, and I believe the threshold I set for myself was 7%. Now, I'm not going to accept, that doesn't mean I'm going to accept an increase to 7%, but that was the sort of cut-off where it really became worthwhile to introduce some exemptions, in my opinion, and that was working on figures I'd had from Treasury. But at 5%, I really don't think it's cost-effective to reduce it. And if you look at what happened in the UK, for example, on food, there's a whole bureaucracy that's grown up around VAT and whether something is a Jaffa cake or whether a Jaffa cake is a biscuit or a cake or whatever, whether food is hot, whether it's just been microwaved. It's a minefield. I think this island is much better to keep it low and keep it simple.
Yes, we recently discussed this in the States, and that's exactly the thing. It would cost far too much to administer a department to actually take GST off specific goods. The easiest way around it, which we have part of that system going at the moment, is there's a subsidy component for people who are in hardship. But actually, the fairer way to do it across the board would be raise the threshold limit on tax. Because to alter the GST payment at the moment would not make any economic sense whatsoever.
We've got time for a couple more questions. It's a long one.
Good evening. I'd like to ask the candidates, given the state of the budget deficit, how would they increase the income to the states of Jersey coffers, and how would they reduce costs? Thank you.
Well, thankfully, I'm not in that position as a Treasury Minister or a top accountant to be able to give you a truthful answer. And we've got a whole team of experts in the Treasury, 30-odd people in there, who are the best on making investments, funding, various things that they need to make the whole Treasury operation tick. There's no way that I can answer a question on that kind of thing if they don't make it work.
What would you target to reduce costs?
Specifically targets to reduce cost, I'd like to target unnecessary unemployment benefits on the long-term unemployed. But that runs into other things. In order to do that, you have to really change the mindset on people's attitude to work. We have to make it look attractive to work. As far as I'm concerned, any job is better than no job, so you have to start somewhere.
Right. It's a very complex thing, and I think the best change will be affected by lots of little changes. One thing that really niggles me is that we pay income support to people who are not working, but there are jobs that they could do, but they're not viable, economically viable. It seems to me we should support businesses more so that they can afford to take on staff at a realistic wage. Thereby, we're paying the businesses, making them more profitable, but we're not paying the income support. That way, we're getting tax benefits from the businesses because as they grow, they can take on more staff. Small things, small changes in perhaps benefits that way. The French have done a lot of work on supporting their small and medium enterprises, and I think we could do that. I also think trimming costs, e-government is going to trim costs. E-government is going to make things accessible without the massive costs of printing, etc. I remember reading that there was something that really struck a chord with me, that by changing the type font that the US government used, they saved such a huge amount of money that they could actually fund one of their departments, simply because it used less ink. There are lots of different ways that we can make small changes. That's just an aside there. But The deficit will have to be tackled in lots of ways. It will have to be tackled by a combination of increased revenue and I think efficiency savings. But what we really need to be doing, I think, as a first step is capturing the tax which is payable here, which is fleeing because of the non-resident status. And I think that's something, and that is one area, one positive area of the property tax consultation that we do need to look at.
Any more? Anybody else? Okay, Glenn, you have a second go.
It's not a technical question, it's not a financial question. My question is, how do you bring back the community spirit back to the parish?
Well, the community spirit is there in lots of different ways, but there are lots of things that I've tried to do over the past couple of years that have been quite difficult. And one thing that we always used to have was a parish dinner, and that was a great success. And then we had them for a number of years inside the community centre. I think we need to make more large parish events. We've had fantastic events at Jubilees. When we've all got together, we've all sort of just mucked in. We've got the 70th anniversary of the Liberation coming ahead next May, and I think the parish should really get together and make a huge effort to have a fantastic celebration around that day. And if I am re-elected, if anybody would like to volunteer to be on the committee, please let me know. Thank you.
I think we need to promote ourselves better. We have lots of organisations within St Mary, but they don't all talk to each other. We need some media to bring that together, and what could be better than the normal quarterly parish communique which goes out. I think that could be extended to actually include all these different organisations and make people more aware of what goes on around you. And that should generate interest amongst each other.
It looks as the questions have... No, we've got one more, last one, Ken.
Thank you very much. Can I ask both candidates, whichever one of you becomes constable, are you going to be prepared to work closer with our new deputy than what I believe hasn't been happening in the last 2 or 3 years?
That's something that I feel very concerned about. And yes, I would. That's my prime objective. If I get in as constable, I will work with the deputy and with the whole administration. And I think that's quite important. That's an important key to bonding the parish.
I couldn't agree more. It is very important for the deputy and the constable to work together. I've got a track record of working with a wide range of people from all backgrounds, and that will continue. I know both of the candidates very well, who are one of them is going to be the next deputy, and if I'm re-elected, I know that there will be a very positive working relationship, whichever one of them is elected. Thank you.
Well, on that positive note, we've had 19 questions, which is 8 better than we had for the deputies. Now we'll have a summing up from each of the candidates. Would you like to kick off, John? 3 minutes. Sue's got a stopwatch chart.
As constable, I would hope to be sympathetic and available to listen to all parishioners' requirements, to encourage parishioners to take an active role in parish affairs and improvements, someone who will take up parishioners' problems with a view to solving or compromising that problem, someone who will keep parishioners informed of important issues that involve the parish, debate those issues at parish meetings, and take propositions to the states which affect the parish only with their approval. I would ensure that there is total transparency in all parish matters, someone who will put running the parish first and foremost before accepting states-appointed commitments. I am fortunate in that I have the support of my wife Barbara in order that I am able to commit to that. Her support and willingness to be part of the social aspects of the parish have enabled me to agree to accept the encouragement and persuasion of many parishioners to stand for constable. I am indeed honoured to have been asked. This is something that I can do, that I want to do for the benefit of our parish and community. Being a constable is a commitment, not a job. The most precious thing to me is time. I am prepared to devote that time to the parish and parishioners. If those ideals and qualities are something that you would like to have in a constable, then I am the person who will commit to those ideals. I offer you that choice. Thank you all.
Fellow parishioners, thank you again for coming tonight. I hope you found the meeting useful in helping you to make a choice on October the 15th. I hope I have explained that I have a vision for the development of the parish infrastructure, which I have driven forward a long way in the past 3 years, but which still has a long way to go. I want to be able to carry on the work I have started and undertake yet more. And in order to do so, with your support, I am prepared to seek the appropriate level of political responsibility in this area. I firmly believe that depending on the result of the referendum, this could be one of the most important terms of office for the Connétable as a whole. This could be the time when the future direction of the parish system is determined and possibly changed forever. A strong parish voice is needed in the next assembly more than ever, and I believe I have proven my ability. I have a great deal of varied experience behind me. I ask questions, I debate. As chairman of PPC, I brought many propositions to the States, including major legislative changes, and I use all of the skills that I learned then in that forum for the benefit of this parish. I am, as I have demonstrated, tried and tested. I am not merely willing to be your constable. I am dedicated to and enthusiastic about the role, just as I am committed to and passionate about this parish. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and I ask for your support on October the 15th.
Okay, that wraps it all up. Just two things. Can some of the younger male members of the audience help us to stack the chairs back? And we have to do that before we go home. And secondly, please drive carefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you.